just like a lot of you, wear a lot of different hats in my role. One of the things that I do is work directly with districts as they are trying to blend their instruction with the use of technology. And I also have the honor of getting to lead what are called digital learning coaches. You may remember those people as technology integration specialist or a technology resource teacher. We're really not hung up on what the title is that you give those people, but I bet a lot of you know them, especially from this past year. They were the people who supported the teachers as they were trying to implement instruction with the use of technology this past year. So they may have been the ones who are running around trying to help teachers with their Google Classroom or with Flipgrid or with Teams or Zoom or Meet or whatever it was that you were doing in the district. So I get to work with those people as well. And I say all that because I got to lead this group with the writing of the technology standards, which is why you're all in this session today. I had never led a group of the writing team until this. And so when they asked me, and this will all make sense in a few minutes as we go through this, but they asked me if I would lead that writing team. And I was like, okay, I've worked as a teacher. Of course, I use standards all the time, but I've never actually written the standards. And honestly, I didn't write them. I got to lead the team who wrote them. So I said, I'll be happy to work with this, but can I lead the team as if I were still a teacher in the classroom, because that's the way I want to see these written. And they were like, hey, look, if you're leading it, you can do whatever you want. And I told them really quickly, like, you may regret saying that, but okay, let's do this thing. So we actually started writing the technology standards in 2019 with the intent of those rolling out in August of 2020. But boy, aren't we glad they didn't, because that might have been a little too much to handle, a new set of standards during the pandemic. And so we held off an additional year. And actually, the timing is ideal, because as you look at this set of standards, the first thing I want you to understand is that these are not another set of standards on top of things that they're doing already. In fact, it's really, truly the validation of what they did this past year with the use of technology. And so, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. So let me go ahead and share my screen, because I am first and foremost a teacher, and I just do so much better when I get to show stuff. So you can see that now. All right, so the Kentucky Standards site, as you see on my screen, obviously that's a site that many of us are familiar with, because that's where all the other standards are housed. And so you can actually navigate straight to it, just kystandards.org, and you can see all of the standards that we have in the state. I do want to point out one specific difference right here at the bottom of the screen. And this is where some people have gotten a little bit confused this past spring and summer, is that, and rightfully so, we use the term computer and technology interchangeably many times. But in this instance, we're not using the word computer, we're using the word technology. There's a lovely set of computer science standards that are written, and those are not the ones that we're talking about. Those are the standards that if you have a computer science pathway, or if you have a teacher who is teaching computer science, then those are absolutely the standards to use. But those are not the ones we're talking about. The ones that we're going to talk about today are these down here, the Kentucky Academic Standards for Technology. And so you're going to see, as I open this document, that those are a requirement. There is a regulation written around those, and those start in kindergarten. So those are kindergarten through grade 12. It's a graduation requirement. So they're not an optional set of standards. So let's keep that in mind that these must be taught beginning in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And so I'm going to jump straight out to that document, and it's going to look like this. So really quick, just a little bit of housekeeping around this document. You'll see really quickly that the table of contents is an interactive table of contents, which means I can click on those words and it will take me directly to the page. So, for example, if I click on legal basis, in all your pleasure reading, you can read the regulation around the technology standards. And so there is a bill, there's a regulation that says that these are a graduation requirement. I'm going to show you really quickly. I'm going to pop out of that document and show you this. And this is a document many of you may be very familiar with. It's our minimum graduation requirements. And at the bottom of that document, there is a bullet that says demonstrate competency in technology. And that is in reference to the regulation. And that's where that connection is. And so it is a graduation requirement. It is something that that you will have to embed within your courses. And I say embed within your courses because this is not just an additional class to tack on to a student's schedule, like a technology class. That's not what this means. This is something that is to be embedded within your courses. So again, you can read through this. It's really a fantastic explanation, but it is a lot of talk. So I'm not going to read to you, but just know that if you are looking for that legal basis, it is on page 5 of this document. What I would like to point you to, though, and if you have this open, you're welcome to access the document, or you can just follow along on the screen. But what I would like to point you directly to is this Appendix A. And this might help you too, especially with the regulation piece, because right there on the screen, you'll see that there are just 5 bullets that kind of highlight some of the key points from that regulation. So if you don't want to read all of the legal jargon, you can come right here for a really quick snapshot of what that means. But on this screen, what I really want to highlight is this image right here. So let's think back to the 90s, if you will. And in the 1990s, that's when we started seeing technology in our school buildings. And so in the 90s, we were just learning how to use the technology. Like, okay, this is a mouse, this is a keyboard, this is a monitor, here's how you turn it on. And so those were some of those pieces back then. Then as we progressed in the early 2000s, we started seeing how technology was used to learn. So you started seeing the computers replace typewriters and replace some of those other things that we saw in our school buildings. And so we're using the technology to learn. But what we are seeing today is true transformative learning with the use of technology. And so that means exactly what we saw this past year. We saw teachers leveraging technology to continue with their instruction with their students. And so that is that that transformation that we have seen through the state for the past 30 years. And one piece that I want to mention right here, especially highlight, is the fact that all of our school buildings in the state of Kentucky have had internet access since the 90s. We were the first state in the nation to have internet access to all school districts. That doesn't mean all homes, but back in the 90s, we had access to the internet in every single school district back in the 90s. So we were we were paving the way. So that's cool to know. Now, one of the pieces that I want to highlight also right here in Appendix A is this piece that talks about the requirement. And as you read through that information, you're going to realize that there's not a test for these standards. Let me say that again. There's not a test for this set of standards. And I'm so thrilled that there is not. Because in all honesty, there shouldn't be a set of standards for this, because you're not going to see anywhere in this document, you're not going to see or read it talk about teaching the kids to click. Do they know how to mute their mic? Do they know how to turn their camera on or off? That's not in there. You're not going to see information about, can they type 50 words a minute? There's nothing about that keyboarding that's in there. It's how are they using the technology to learn how to read, to learn how to write, to use in the math class, a science class, social studies class. And so that's what you're going to see. So there's not that test that says, check mark, we did it. So how do you ensure that schools are implementing this if it is a graduation requirement? So we do have some guidance, and that is in Appendix A. So you'll definitely want to look at Appendix A. And so it talks about establishing a policy. It talks about you can possibly have like performance-based programs or project-based. You can have an STLP in your school building. You can meet these in your CTE pathways. Maybe you have apprenticeships. You can have the students build portfolios that they're able then to drop in their validation or their evidence of meeting the standards. So there are tons of ways that they can meet those that graduation requirement, but it is up to each individual district to determine how they're going to do that. KDE does not regulate that, just like we don't tell you which curriculum to use. It's up to a school building and a district to determine what curriculums that they use. So the same thing is like, how are you going to do that? Well, it sort of depends on who you have in your building and what you're doing in your building. And so that's why it's up to the individual districts to determine how they're going to meet these. But it is a requirement. And a lot of them are including that like in their CDIP or their CSIP as that validation of what they're doing to meet those standards. So that's all the lovely upfront information. But I know what many of our people want to know is like, well, what are the standards? What do they look like? How do I use them? So as you're scrolling through this document, and by the way, Appendix B tells that who those lovely people were who wrote the standards, and you may recognize some of those names. But this progression chart, and I know that's tiny font, I'm going to leave it tiny for just a second. This progression chart is really the piece that your educators, that all educators want to know. Like, just tell me, what do I need to do, and in what grade level do I do this? So I want to explain what this screen is right here and why it looks the way it looks. Our writing team was extremely intentional about laying out all the other sets of standards. So they literally laid out the writing and the math and the science and the social studies and the arts. They laid out all of the standards, kindergarten through grade 12. And so we aligned these horizontally and vertically. And the wording in this is so user friendly. And so they wanted to make sure that every single indicator, all of these little boxes, and I'll zoom in here just a second, but all of these little boxes were truly easily embedded within all of those other standards. Because remember, we're not testing these standards. We're testing whether or not they can read. We're testing whether or not they understand the social studies concept or the science concept or the math processes, all of that. But we're using the technology to help them learn those. What I want you to see right here on the screen is how we wrote them. Because we know that a lot of times, in order for a student to be able to apply their understanding, they have to learn a skill, right? So as I look at this particular concept of empowered learner, and that's one of the concepts, empowered learner, I see all these shades of green. Down there's some yellow, but here I'm looking at the shade of green. So there must be something that's associated with that color code, and there is. If I see the lighter shade of green, and I'm going to zoom in now so you can see this number, you'll see that right here in the indicator that there is a 1 in that spot with all of the light green. And if I scroll down and all of a sudden it becomes darker shade of green, there's a 2 in the spot. And that's because anything that is a lighter shade of that color, whoops, too tiny. The lighter shade of green represents a skill that is to be learned. And the darker shade of green represents the application of that skill that would have been learned in the lighter shade of green. For example, let's just go up here to one of them. So let's look at this K2. This is a pretty simple one to understand. It says set learning goals and use digital tools to achieve those goals with guidance and support. For example, increase reading fluency by recording and reflecting upon student reading. So the writing team looked at that and said, you know what? Kindergartners, maybe you're in your school, you map test. And so as your students, K through 2, are coming through and they're map testing, they have to get their scores. And I taught kindergarten for a year, so I remember my kiddos would get their scores and we had a little graph and they would color in the bar to show what their score was. Like, you got to this point, right? And then they would set a goal. The teacher would help them, and that's what that with guidance and support means. The teacher would help them say, okay, this is where you are. By December, let's get to this point. And so we would draw a line of where we wanted to see them get to. And then in December, when they would test again, we would color in the bar to see if they met that goal or if they still had a little ways to go. So we're talking about their reading, not the technology, but let's think about that little bar that they colored in. Instead of using a crayon to color on a piece of paper, our students, and I promise you, even in kindergarten, they know how to go in there and color in a cell on a spreadsheet. They know how to paint on an iPad. So they absolutely can color in on a device what that bar, where that bar is. And they can start to map out their goals. And so they're learning a skill. As you start to read across that that particular indicator, you will see that there's that progression of what that means. And then as you scroll down to the darker shade of green, then you'll see that it talks about using age-appropriate digital resources to produce and publish information. So now we're going to let the students decide on a resource that they're going to use to produce maybe a graph or a chart, and let them start building on that. So again, the lighter shade of green is a skill. The darker shade of green is the application of some of those skills. As I scroll down, you're going to see this exact same thing happen in every single concept. This is super important to understand as we move forward with the rest of this. In digital citizenship, we're looking at the lighter shade and the darker shade of yellow. And with our knowledge constructor, that lighter shade of blue and a darker shade of blue. And it goes all the way through this document. All right. So that's the way the standards are set up. Now, as I told you earlier in the introduction, I mentioned the fact that I also get to lead the digital learning coaches in the state. And so what I did when we had this extra year of building these and getting them ready to roll out, I actually worked with our digital learning coaches and asked them to look at these and just try to punch holes in it, like find all the things wrong, because we've got time now that if there's something wrong with this, we have time to fix it. And so that's exactly what we did. So we have about 560 digital learning coaches across the state now. And so we used this document this past school year as teachers were doing what they were doing. And that's why I am so confident in the rollout of these that they're going to be easily embedded, because we actually used them this past year sort of on the back end, just as sort of a dry run or a test to see if they would. But what they did is, as they were looking at every single box that you see on that progression chart, they were pulling together resources, because we know that teachers spend anywhere from 7 to 12 hours per week looking for resources and examples and templates and things to use, all those resources to implement when they teach something in their classroom. And what digital learning coaches are so fantastic about doing is finding those resources, helping to alleviate some of that stress for our teachers when they're implementing things. And so our DLCs went through this document and they started curating, pulling together all of the resources that they could possibly find that they felt was a true resource. A solid. Oops, somebody may need to mute. And so
Hey, Laura. Can you unmute yourself? I'm sorry.
there we go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So here was what I asked the DLCs to do was to find all the resources they could find to make sure the teachers were able to teach each of those indicators in their classroom. And so I asked them to find the best of the best. I said, please don't give me like a blue million resources around empowered learner, because that's really no better than just a teacher going out there and Googling it themselves. So go ahead and just give me the best of the best, and let's pull all of these resources together. And so that's what we did. And so I'm going to give you over here, I'm going to give you a source that you are definitely going to want to write down. And I just dropped it into the chat. That is the link. So you can, if you just want to copy and paste that into a new tab, that's where I'm getting ready to go. And I can promise you, when you see this, you're going to say, oh yeah, I need that. So there it is in the chat. But that site, that link is going to take you out to our Digital Learning Coach website. So it looks like this. But whenever our DLCs were working through those technology standards, we needed a place to house all of these resources. So you'll see here on our technology standards page that you absolutely can go to the kystandards.org site to get the standards. You can also just come, if you're just looking for the tech standards document, you can click here and you can access that PDF. I'm going to skip over this little GIF really quick, but that is it's just a real quick GIF of what this Tech Standards dashboard is if you forget how to use it. But I want to go straight down here to this link. It says the KAES for Technology Dashboard of Resources and Examples. This is where I started having our DLCs pull all the resources together. And so it's going to look like this when you get there. And you'll see over here on the right-hand side, there's the color coding. That's why I said this is so super important as we're talking about all of these things moving forward. So the color coding that was on that progression chart, right? The thing that looked like this. Oh, that's there. The progression chart, right? All of that color coding matches everything that's on our dashboard. So what does this mean? Well, if I am looking for something around computational thinker, I can come right here and I can see all of the resources that the DLCs have sort of vetted for you. And they're like, yep, that's a really good one. Here's what it is. Here are the grade levels that you could use this in. Here's what type of a resource it is. So this one's a website, but we have documents. We've got physical resources, all sorts of things that are out there that they have found. Is there a cost associated with it? That's super helpful because I'm all about free, but sometimes things have to have a little cost to them. I understand that. But as you're reading this particular one, if you're like, oh, that sounds really good, I want to check it out. All I have to do is click on that little arrow that says go, and it's going to pop me out to that particular website or that document or whatever the resource is. So now my teachers can come to this and feel confident that that is a good, solid resource. I remember as a teacher, I would find something. I'm like, I don't know, is this good? I'm going to try it. And then I use it and I'm like, well, that was terrible. Don't ever use that again. And so this is a place where they can come and feel confident that these resources are going to meet those particular standards that they're looking at. So again, these are teacher resources. Now it gets better though, because this past year, as our students were doing all of these things online, and we started finding all these fantastic examples across the state of those standards. And I'll just say this on a side note. On social media, on the news, so whether you're looking at Twitter or Facebook or you're watching the evening news, there were tons of pictures or videos of our students making and creating things. And here's what I want to point out to you. What I saw on those snapshots of what our kids were doing in Kentucky were things like outside using sidewalk chalk to learn their alphabet or to do some math problems, or they were going on a scavenger hunt for their chemistry class, or they were making and creating this or that. And that's what we want our students to continue doing. That's the real world application of their learning. You know what I didn't see? I did not see screenshots or championing, oh, look, our students finished all of these paper packets. They did these worksheets. I didn't see that. I did not hear that. Like, oh, this is fantastic. They're going to do 100 more worksheets. Nope, didn't see it. Did not hear it. And so that's the piece that I wanted our DLCs to also capture on this dashboard, are all the things that our students made and created, because I'm a visual learner and I know most educators are. And when I look at those technology standards as a lay teacher, somebody who would not teach technology, sometimes I get lost in the jargon of what that document might say. But if you would just show me an example of what that meant, maybe, just maybe, I could meet that standard. And so that's exactly what this piece is down here at the bottom. So all of these are called cards. And so down here at the bottom, you're going to see student examples of them meeting these standards, y'all, this past year. And so this is why I'm telling you, like, our kids have done this. And so if I go back up here to this dashboard at the top, but I want to show you how to use it. All of these little boxes over here on the left side are filters, just like you would use a website and start drilling down to a site to find what it is you want. So these are our filters. So if I just leave all of them checked, I'm going to see all of the teacher resources over here on the right-hand side. But let's say I don't want all the teacher resources. Let's say I'm just focusing on, let's say, Knowledge Constructor. So if looking for something on Knowledge Constructor, I click Only, the check marks go away, it starts doing its thing. And now over here on the right-hand side, I don't have all those colors. I just have Knowledge Constructor. So now I can find the resources to meet those particular indicators. But look what happened down here at the bottom. Down at the bottom, now all those boxes are blank except for Knowledge Constructor. Now I could go back up here and I could say, you know what, I only want to find the Knowledge Constructor examples or resources around reading or science or any of those. I could also choose my grade level that I wanted to focus in on. And again, it would do that on the teacher resources. It would also refine your search for the student examples. Let me just show you a couple, just to give you an idea of what's in here. And I've already got a couple pulled up, so you wouldn't have to watch my screen roll. But here's one on Knowledge Constructor. And you know what I have found? I've done this presentation 1,000 times this summer, and every time I pull this up in a district or with a group of teachers, they're like, oh my gosh, I did that with my students this past year. I just didn't know that meant Knowledge Constructor. And that's exactly what I've heard all summer long, is that people are doing stuff like this. But then you know what's the beauty of having these resources? readily available is if a teacher looks at this and says, I didn't do that, but I could. Like, that's super cool. And yeah, my kids could do that in 5th grade. You know what you can do? You go up here to the word file and you click on make a copy of that entire presentation. And you know what it does? It gives you the template. It gives you that slide deck that you can just use. So guess what we've just done, y'all? We have just eliminated that 7 to 12 hours that our teachers have to go out there and find the resource. Then they have to go build this activity for their students to do. And then they have to figure out, like, what's going to, how do I connect this? How do I make this interactive? We've eliminated all of that time because now I've got the teacher resource and I've got the student examples. If I like it, make a copy of it and run with it. And so another example that we have, here's one on Twitter. And I bet some of you are probably thinking the same thing, that this is what we saw this past year. Here's some 5th graders that participated in a digital citizenship challenge by creating Flipgrids. You know how many times I've heard Flipgrid this past year? And comic strips teaching about digital citizenship. Wait a minute, did you hear that? The students were making these to teach digital citizenship. You know what that does for our kids? Empowers those learners. So when a student can explain and teach themselves, then they are able then to have a better understanding of that standard. So I just said empowered learner. You know what? There's a whole concept around empowered learner. And so not only did I meet the knowledge constructor, but I also met digital citizenship in this, and I also met empowered learner standards. So just right there in that one little blurb of that particular student example, I know of 3 standards that I met. So, and then another one, many of you all have an STLP in your school building. And if you don't, I would love to see you all add that to your day. But there are lots of STLP projects through here. I'm not going to play that video, but if you do play one of those videos, then you're going to find that every single STLP project meets all 7 concepts. So you're going to meet at least 7 standards in every single project. And I know that because the rubric, I helped Jeff Sobolski, who leads STLP, he's on my team. I helped him rewrite that standard, the rubric, and the rubric is the technology standards. So if you're doing STLP, you're meeting the standards. So let me go back to the dashboard. And let's say that I've been working on this dashboard and now I need to find something on digital citizenship, but I can't make those check marks come back. You can go right over here to where it says reset at the top, and that will refresh that entire dashboard for you. Okay. So let me go back really quick. It looks like I've got awesome. Thank you, Cindy, for dropping that URL in there. Let me go back really quick, just as a quick refresh. If you navigate to the DLC website, and for those of you who are wanting to share this, please share it with your teachers, because this is the only place where that dashboard is housed, is on this website right here. So if you're wanting to send them somewhere, you definitely want to give them that bit.ly/Kentucky DLC is what's called a shortened URL. And I'm going to drop it in the chat again. So you'll definitely want to write that down and just share it with your teachers. Then all they have to do is up there in that little Omni box where you would normally type an address, is type that in. And it is cap sensitive, so make sure your KDLC are capitalized. It'll take you to this website, and over on the left-hand side, click on Technology Standards. It brings you to this page where you can get a copy of the actual standards document, but you can also navigate to the dashboard of teacher resources and student examples. If you forget how to use it, that's what this little GIF is for. So if you pop this out, it's going to actually show you how to, after it loads, it'll actually show you how to navigate that dashboard, and it's going to be slow to load because we got so many people out there on it right now. But I'll let you watch it. There it is in a little form. But it just shows you how to click on stuff and find what it is that you're wanting, the teacher resources and the student examples. All right. So you'll also see here on the screen that there's this thing called Digital Learning Guidelines. And so if you click on that, you're going to find a document that looks like this. This actually was written about 15 years ago, the original one, but we've updated it last year in 2020. We updated this, but the digital learning guidelines is centered around 5 principles, and you can see them listed here on your screen. And it's also linked on the DLC website. I'm not going to read to you. Let's see, and I'm not seeing her screen. So who is that? Anissa, you may want to go back to up there at the top where it shows like the gallery and it shows like the layout. If you're not seeing that, you can click on the 3 dots that gives you more actions, and you can click on like the gallery or the preview, or there's several different options inside Teams of how it lays out. And so that's whatever it is that you're choosing. But it looks like I've got a couple devices open, so I'm looking at it a couple different ways. So you may just want to check what your settings are on your device. So go up to the top and click on those 3 dots and see what, got your gallery selected. Try another one and see. It may just be the screen that you're on. All right, we'll keep trucking and see if you're able to find it here in just a second. So the 5 principles right here of what digital learning sort of means. And so as I scroll through this, there's a breakdown then of each of those guidelines. So, it talks about the pedagogy behind it, about the digital readiness, leadership, assessment, continuous improvement. So I want to click through this really quickly and just highlight a couple of things. Of course, if you have an online course, making sure that the teacher of the course has the credentials behind teaching that particular course. I love this one that talks about digital readiness. Schools implementing online learning provide adequate facilities and tools. Y'all, we provided more technology this past year. Most of our students in the state of Kentucky have a device right there where it says a device for every student. And the internet access. So we've worked really hard on that. And I know you've heard tons about internet access, but all of that is in the guidelines. The leadership and governance. As I mentioned earlier, even with the technology standards, it's up to the district to determine, and that's because you all have local control over your district. That you choose your site base, you choose your board members, and so a lot of that then is through your leadership. But just their understanding. Assessment, that they're regularly evaluating their assessment system. We have talked a lot about that too, haven't we, this past year with assessments online. But the one piece that I want to spend another minute or two on is this one right here, the continuous improvement planning. And that talks about schools and districts assessing the alignment of goals for digital learning benchmarks. Like, what are we going to do? In my heart of hearts, I know without a doubt that this upcoming school year is going to be the best school year that we've ever seen in education. I know it is, because we've got phenomenal educators out there. Our educators truly are what held our society together during the pandemic. You saw and heard more about education this past year than ever before. On the news and on social media, and our educators are they are the rock stars, they are the champions, they are the superheroes of everything that happened during the pandemic. And I know without a doubt that pre-pandemic, that all the greatness that they did with teaching and learning and all of the things that they learned how to do. Like, you want to talk about skill building, like they built some major tech skills this past year. And they take all of that and combine it, or they blend. That's a key word. They blend teaching, all of their amazing teaching, with the use of technology to move forward into this upcoming school year. I know they're going to have the best year ever, because they're going to take all of those pieces that they've learned to truly meet the needs of all of their students. And then having that technology standards document to check mark to validate all of their learning, it's going to be remarkable. And so it's really important, though, moving forward, that our schools, our districts, start creating a plan. They've never had to do this before. So right here on this screen, you see this continuous improvement. Like, we're always all growing and learning. So how do I improve these successes that we've had? How do I set up this timeline? What is this going to look like? I need to have some benchmarks that by a certain day or a certain month in the school year, we should be at this point using whatever, using technology, using the standards, whatever that is, making sure that you're using those things. But it's so important for us to have a plan so that we know when we get there. How many times have you had a plan and somebody said, "How'd you do that?" And you think, "Well, I don't know. I just kind of did it." But we really need an intentional plan that says, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, and set some milestones along the way. Some people refer to those as 30, 60, 90s. Some of them have milestones. Some of them have pacing guides. Whatever that's going to look like for you, then creating that so that you can have this continuous improvement. I would be remiss if I did not mention this, as that Sonia, I will share the links again. I don't use PowerPoint. I use sites and I use things, but I will send you all of this. It honestly, if you go to that DLC website, you've got it all. It's all on the website, and it's those links back there on this screen. So I used the standards document, and then there it is. And I use the dashboard, and then I'm using the guidelines. So that's the presentation right there. But what I was mentioning earlier is that one of the things that my teammate Ben Maynard and I do is work through those processes that I just mentioned. We work through those processes with districts. So pre-pandemic, we would go in and we would actually help build up skills, and we would help get the administrators on board. We would get some of the skill built up for some of the teachers. Then we started working with digital learning coaches. Obviously, during the pandemic, we couldn't get into the buildings. And so Ben and I worked on a process of continuing the assistance provided to the districts, but in a virtual world. And so I really wanted us to truly walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So how do we do that? I'm going to give a plug for that next session. I think Ben is up after me, and he's going to be talking a little bit about it. But I am going to show you this other site that you'll want. And it's literally, if you think about this site right here with the DLCs, the standards document, the resources, the digital guidelines, like, how do I pull all that together, and how do I help my teachers? How do I help my building? How do I help my district truly start embedding this? And it all focuses on taking a step back and looking at the big picture. Like, how have you created your curriculum maps? How have you created your pacing guides? How did you help your teachers, or you, the teacher, how did you set up your learning management system, whether that was Google Classroom or Teams or Schoology or Canvas, whatever platform you used? How did you set that up? as an administrator, as a teacher? Did you do that in a way that was helpful, or was it confusing? And so a lot of that information then is found right here. And I'm going to give you all another address. Let me drop it into the chat. And so this is this is my transition from me to Ben as well. And so this is also my teaser, so that you'll stick around for his session too. But coachingplus.pro. coachingplus.pro. And this website is designed to help you take those tech standards, take your wonderful teaching and learning that you had pre-pandemic, taking the wonderful skills that your teachers learned this past year, and truly build a blended learning environment so that, sometimes paper and pencil and a crayon is the best thing to use. Absolutely use it. And sometimes a computer is the best thing to use. You'll never hear me say, let's do everything 100% on technology, or you'll never hear me say, let's do 100% of everything with paper and pencil, because that's not going to meet the needs of all the learners. And so Coaching Plus is, just like it says, it's the connection to digital instructional design. And what's the impact on the learning? Did it help? Because if it didn't, trash it, do something different. And so how do I do that? How do I do it and do it well? So Ben and I have developed this. We've worked really closely with some national leaders, Eric Schinninger and Marcia Kish. And so they got some short little videos about what this means and how to do it. And they are championing the work that we've done. You're also going to see Marty Park. He is my boss at KDE. And then some of you may have worked with Jenny Ray through like the Principal Partnership Project at P3. If you're an administrator, you may have worked with her. And so she's championing it as well, that this is the way to go. So let me show you really quick how this is set up. It's set up in learning modules. And so you can do as much or as little as you want to with this site. But there are 6 modules in it. And in each module, there are 4 lessons, if you will, that you can kind of jump through. So let me go to the first one. Module 1 is going to look like this. There are 4 lessons in this module. Lesson 1 is the blueprint map. So you're starting to look at like I said earlier, curriculum maps, pacing guides, setting up your virtual classroom. How did you create that thing? Was it easy to navigate? Your blended learning syllabus. What all should I be including at the beginning of the school year so that my students understand what it is we're doing, whether it's with paper, pencil, or whether it's with a device? And then how do I empower my students? Like, for heaven's sakes, how do I get some of them just to click on the link to get on the call, right? We heard that so much this past year. And so each one of these lessons has a couple of parts. You have your video, and then there's a slide deck that's associated with it. So here's the slide deck, and if I open that slide deck, you're going to see really quickly that it literally follows what that presenter is talking about in the video. If I like it, if I like all the stuff that's in here, I click on that blue button, use a template, and it just downloads it to my drive. But the cool thing about this particular site is that anything that you see on here that is underlined like that, or use the lesson, if I click on that, I get the templates. Remember, just like I did back there in on that slide deck for the tech standards, all of the DLCs that help build this site have made it so easy that you can just grab every single template, every document, every slide deck, whatever it is, you can have it. And so we just house, as we've worked around the state, we have housed the best of the best that we could find. Now, here's a really cool piece to every single one of these modules, is that we made a connection to the administrators. And you're going to see a principal in every single one of these modules who makes the connection to the teacher framework, like the Danielson, or to PCEL. And so then there's also the resources there, and then there's a feedback section. That's going to be my teaser. I want you to stick around for the session that Ben is going to talk about, because he's going to go into a little bit more in depth about this piece as well. But the entire thing, let me pull it all back together for you. If you go back out here to the DLC website. And again, that's at bit.ly/Kentucky DLC. If you access this site, you're going to have everything that you need in order to find all the things that I've talked about today, which are the standards document. Like, what do I have to do? What's the regulation around it? And remember, it's just out there on that document. The regulation is back up there on page 5 of the document. What's the legal basis around it? What is this thing called technology standards? How do I meet the graduation requirement? That's in Appendix A. And so there's the summary of it being a grad requirement and where we've been and where we are today. How do I meet it? Here's some guidance of how you can meet it. And then, of course, the piece that your teachers are going to want is the progression chart. Like, what do I have to teach in which grade level? So there's the progression chart that shows all of it, broken down by concept, by grade band. Now, when I need to meet that standard, how do I meet it? If I go back to the DLC website, then I've got the link to the dashboard. And that's that dashboard of teacher resources and examples. And I can hone in, I can filter whatever it is I'm looking for right here and get my resources and get student examples that I can just make a copy of and use in my classroom. And so that in a nutshell is everything that we've talked about as far as the tech standards, and then taking those and connecting them to our digital guidelines of what it means to embed technology into a blended environment. And then how do I actually start doing this? And that, if you're interested, is inside our Coaching Plus website. And as I said earlier, Ben Maynard is going to be talking about that in just a bit. So I'm going to stop talking. That's a lot of talking. And let me open it up for questions. And y'all feel free to unmute. I have no problem with somebody unmuting and interrupting and saying, wait a minute, go back to that screen. What'd you say? Or drop it in the chat, either one. So now's your time. And I know I didn't answer everything. There's 123 of y'all in this room. I know somebody's got a question like, what was that? Where do I go? How do I do it? What did you mean? You all are very welcome. I'm going to give you there's my email address. Please feel free to email me at any time if you guys are working through stuff, whether it's with the technology standards, the Coaching Plus, whether it's with digital learning coaches and you just want to know more about that. Please let me know how I can help you. I'm available. I'm an educator, so I'm available. I don't have hours. Email me anytime you want to. The actual standards document. So if you go to, I'm actually going to give you, if you go to that DLC website, it's literally linked right there. That's the PDF of the document. Or you can also go to, you'll see it right there on the screen, kystandards.org. That's all the standards for Kentucky. On that site, you're going to see the reading, the math, the science, social studies, computer science, library media, technology, all of it, all the arts. That's all there. But then this is just a link to that actual PDF if you want it on the DLC website. And I keep nudging you to this because I can promise you, because I've heard it all summer, they're like, okay, that standard site's really good, but I can't find the dashboard on it. It's because the dashboard's not on it. The dashboard is only found right there. So that's why you'd want to go to the DLC website because it's their work. And I really think, I've heard this a lot too this summer, I think that this is going to change the way a lot of standards are written, because this has never happened with any other set of standards to give teachers resources and student examples. It's usually like, here's your standards, go forth and conquer, do a great job, find your stuff, and good luck with that. Just make sure you're doing it. So we wanted to make sure, especially since we had this extra year around the standards, we wanted to make sure that we provided as much assistance up front with them. And that's why I said earlier, they may wish they had not asked me to help write the standards, but I think this is what our teachers want. They need to have those resources and examples, if nothing else, for that assurance that what they're doing is what's actually meeting that standard. All right. Well, Cindy and Sherry, I think.
Laura, I do have one question. Does
Yes.
each district have a digital coach?
That's an awesome question. So if you want to know, so y'all can still see my screen. So do you see the page that says regions? If I go to the regions button, then you're going to see an interactive map. As soon as it pulls.
Recruits coming in and going out, you know.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, he texted and asked.
Cindy, can you mute everybody?
Ron was feeling good. And he says, I'm sick and.
Okay, now I got myself unmuted. So on the regions tab, you see a map of Kentucky, and you can go to any of the counties and click on them, and you will see if they have full-time or part-time DLCs. Out of 171 districts, we are up to 138, I believe, districts, including KSB and KSD, who have a digital learning coach. If you navigate to any of these buttons down here below, you can get a real quick screenshot of those districts if they do have one. So it tells the district name and who their DLC is. So you can navigate that way to get a list as well. So whether you're clicking on the actual map or you go down by region and click on those.
Thank you so much. I just thought that might be helpful.
And if you go there and you're like, I don't think our district has one, then go down here to the contact page on there and email me. And if you don't, I can promise you I've had lots of conversations with a lot of superintendents the past year. When we went into shutdown back March of last year, we had 195 digital learning coaches, 195. And as of last week, we were up to, it was right at 560. So we went from 195 to 560. That's huge growth in a year with the program. So still growing it. So if you don't have a DLC, would love to talk to you and your district about doing that, because it is a really vital role of a support to the teachers as they're doing these things. All right. Well, I appreciate you letting me talk to you all today. Again, if you need me at all, please feel free to reach out anytime about any of these topics, or if there's something else you just want to ask, I'm happy to talk to you about that too. So you all have a phenomenal year this upcoming year. Thank you again so much for what you did this past year and getting through all of these things. But we're going to do well. We've learned a lot, and it's going to be a great year. So I appreciate you all, and Sherry and Cindy, I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to let people know that we are recording these sessions, and once we get them, all fixed and ready to go up on the website, we will be posting those for you all to look back at these. So just want to let everybody know that, and we are ending this session, and we will be back after a 30-minute lunch break for concurrent sessions again at 12:15. So thank you again, Laura. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Laura.